You're listening to 91 Reasons. I'm really sorry.
You're listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, the voice, Jeff Tucker.
Test pilot Tuck Pendleton wants to make history. Supermarket clerk Jack Putter needs a vacation.
Jack, I'm late. That's not good. You know it's coupon day.
Lieutenant Pendleton is about to be miniaturized, placed into this needle, and then injected into this rabbit.
Rock and roll.
But something went wrong, and Tuck's about to get a new destination. Inside Jack Putter.
I'm in a man.
Hello, can you hear me?
I'm possessed.
Now, Jack's got twice the problems,
How you doing, Jack?
but he's double the man. With Tuck on his side,
Give me more count.
in his gut, and on his case.
You're not gonna back groceries all your life, are you, Jack?
And only 24 hours left for Jack to get out of danger, so that Tuck can get out of Jack. Dennis Quaid, Martin Short. Give yourself a shot of adventure. Innerspace.
Man, I'll tell you what. Not Scary Farm is kicking my butt, but I'm back. We're going to do a show today. It's great. I'm going to turn my phone off here, or at least put it on vibrate. So if you hear it vibrating, that's the phone. It's just the phone. So yeah, we're going to sit here. We're going to do a show. And I've been making the family sit and do shows during Scary Farm because it's just easier to set the thing rolling and record it and all, and not sit and think about what I'm going to do. Because when I do these episodes, that requires a lot of like what angle am I taking? What because I don't just do movie reviews. How was the movie? Loved it. Okay, move on. How was the movie? Hated it. Okay, move on. Kingsman, The Golden Circle. Terrible. Waited all that time and it wasn't very good. Blade Runner. Awesome. Waited all that time and it was great. Although I fell asleep 3 times because it was after a hot night. But anyways, the movie I checked out, it's on Netflix, so you don't have to go far if you want to watch it. You can tell by the title, Innerspace. This came out in 1987. And I'm really shocked we haven't revisited the miniature ship in the body as a movie since then. There may have been some, I know what Osmosis Jones, but that doesn't really count, right? But there hasn't been a big budget. I know that Fox was gearing up a remake of Fantastic Voyage, but that never happened, So Innerspace is the last big miniaturized in the body movie, which is interesting because, and I'll get to it in a minute. Let's do it now. Why wait? This was advertised as an adventure inside the human body, and I think if I were to sit and time it, I bet you see footage in the body. Let's see what I've got the Wikipedia page here. The running time is a full 2 hours. I bet in the body is under 15 minutes, maybe even less. And that's simply because those effects are expensive, because everything in this film is practical. There's a couple of optical effects of Tuck miniaturizing, but for the most part, everything you see on film was built for the film. So it did win the Academy Award for Best Visual Effects, which is the only film by Joe Dante to ever do that. But the reason I went and saw it, other than it was a Spielberg production, and I saw every Spielberg movie that came out in the 80s in the theater. No, the reason I went and saw it was I was a big fan of Martin Short. I know, shocker. I've done an episode where I talked about my adulation of Paul Rubens and the character of Pee Wee Herman. But there was another one that was a close second, and they even made a talking doll of Pee Wee, and then on the shelf by Matchbox they also made Ernest, and I'm not talking about Ernest. They also made Freddy Krueger and Beetlejuice, And they also made Ed Grimley. There's a talking Ed Grimley doll, which was Martin Short's character from SCTV. Here's the thing. When I got to be 11, 12, one of the things that I really enjoyed doing was staying up all night on the weekends. School was over. We had a Betamax, so I would record the programs and then watch them over and over again. And I was a big fan of Saturday Night Live. It's funny. The cast I got was the second worst cast of all time, even though it included Robert Downey Jr. and Anthony Michael Hall and Terry Sweeney and a bunch of other guys. Not well remembered. They were quickly thrown out and replaced with Phil Hartman and Mike Myers and Dana Carvey. But there was a short window where I watched every episode of that season. And right before that, Martin Short was on there. That was the Martin Short, Billy Crystal season. But before that, we'll go back even farther back in time. When Saturday Night Live would go off the air here in LA at 1 a.m., they would show SCTV. Now, I didn't know what SCTV was. It was on really late. I was really tired, and it was really weird. But I loved every minute of it. I could probably, and I know I say this a lot, I could do a whole hour on SCTV and watching it over and over again. And all the characters. I mean, look at the cast. Catherine O'Hara, Eugene Levy, Joe Flaherty, Martin Short, Bob and Doug McKenzie, Dave Thomas and Rick Moranis, and so many, Andrea Martin, like some of the funniest people I've ever seen on TV. And right in the middle of it, there was Martin Short doing his Robin Williams. I'm Robin Williams. I'm going to do some improv. And Ed Grimley, it's a very decent show, I must say. Oh, definitely. I watched Wheel of Fortune with Pat Sajak. Yeah, I must say. There was a cartoon of Ed Grimley. He never jumped to the big screen. I don't think Martin wanted to play him for a full 2 hours on the screen. But I just idolized these comedy giants, wanting to be them so bad because they were so funny. And one of the characters that Martin Short did was a character named Nathan Thurm. And he was a lawyer for any type of big business. He was a lawyer for like the tobacco company. He was a lawyer for any kind of oil company. And it was Martin Short with his hair slicked back, little glasses on, and a cigarette with an impossible amount of ash that would never fall. And he was the most nervous guy. And they'd go, Mr. Thurm, you seem nervous. You seem defensive. He'd go, I'm not nervous. I'm not defensive. Maybe you're being defensive. Who's being defensive? You always want to point the finger at me. Why don't you point the finger at yourself once? Think about that. You probably, do you remember the giant Earth Day special they did? Like 1990, where they got every celebrity they could cram into like 3 hours of special to let us know that the Earth needed our help. He was on there as Nathan Thurm, trying to say that we weren't destroying the planet. He was in favor of everything that was terrible. But Martin Short was just so funny to me, and it probably had a lot to do with. This is going to sound weird. He's from Canada. Michael J. Fox was from Canada. They had a similar look, similar hairdos. So I just had a type of star that I gravitated towards, and that's not to say that Rick Moranis and Dave Thomas. God, these were like I said, legends and giants to me. So when Martin Short made the jump to movies, of course I was going to go. Now the problem was, Innerspace came out the summer of 1987, and that was the summer we had to go back. We had to drive to Tennessee for the court case regarding my father's death, his murder. And it was pretty somber. But here's the thing: I didn't want to go. I told my mom, I'm not going, and she was like, "Well, you have to go. You're the evidence. You have to go." So I got bundled into the station wagon, and we drove to Tennessee. Now, back in the day, the way that we enjoyed movies outside of the movie theater was we bought the novelization. The little paperback novelization. So I remember getting the novelization for Innerspace. This was also the summer I got the novelization of RoboCop. And I remember reading them back to back. and knowing I was going to go see these movies at the theater. Now, of the two, RoboCop was the one that became not only a massive hit, but we went and saw again and again and again. And Innerspace sort of got put by the wayside simply because there's not a lot of stuff in the body in it. The stuff that's in there is fantastic. But the plot of the movie is not Tuck Pendleton, played by Dennis Quaid, fighting Martin Short's body. That's not the plot. And the reason is, those effects were expensive. So they had to come up with a script that allowed for the miniaturization plot, but also had other stuff going on. So this is a movie about redemption. Tuck Pendleton is a washed-up, drunk fighter pilot who doesn't get to fly the new experimental planes anymore. We meet him, and if you watch I recommend watching this movie. This is a really well-done film. It might be one of Joe Dante's best. This is the guy who directed Gremlins, Gremlins 2, Explorers. He's got a huge roster of films, of great, great genre films. But this one might be his best film because he's got really high-caliber actors. And if you watch the first 20 minutes of this movie, this is where you're introduced to Dennis Quaid as Tuck Pendleton and Meg Ryan as his love interest, Lydia. She's breaking up with him, and these guys are playing it real. There's no winking at the camera. They don't appear to be in a children's movie. And remember, Innerspace was marketed to teens as like an escape adventure movie, which, yeah, it is, but there's other stuff going on beneath the surface. And when Meg Ryan leaves Dennis Quaid, nude in the middle of the street, she's crying. She's playing it real. And I really appreciated that part of the movie. We're then introduced to Jack Putter, played by Martin Short. He's a very nervous man. His doctor, he's a hypochondriac. His doctor says, "You're the cornerstone of my business here, Jack. Your visits." And his prescription to Jack is to take a vacation. So Jack heads to the mall. This is 2 months after the breakup scene. Jack heads to the mall to book a vacation. And at the same time, we go back to Tuck Pendleton, who is still pretty cocky. He does this thing where he looks in the mirror and he goes, "The Tuck Pendleton machine, 0 defects." And he's very cocky. But he has volunteered to be miniaturized in a pod and injected into a rabbit to see what this looks like, how it works, and what advances this could make to medical science. So, of course, like all these movies, like all these theme park rides, something goes awry. Rival tech company, the bad guys, got to have a bad guy in this film. They bust in and they steal the chip. Now, here's the MacGuffin of the film. There are 2 chips required for miniaturization. The first chip is the miniaturization chip. It's in the lab. The second chip is the re-enlargement chip, and it's on the pod. So the bad guys immediately get the miniaturization chip, but they have to have the second chip, or just shrinking somebody isn't good enough because you can't bring them back. So now we have our plot set in motion, and it's the complication is the last doctor standing grabs the syringe that Tuck is now miniaturized in and takes off across the way to the local mall, where he, in his last effort as he's shot and killed, injects Tuck into Jack Putter. And now we have our plot. The heavy of the film is played by Vernon Wells. He's got interchangeable hands. Vernon Wells is the guy from The Road Warrior. You know him very well. He's also played the same character in Weird Science. A really great 80s villain actor. I remember him in a really low-budget film called Circuitry Man, if you want to check that out. But everything now is set in motion. Tuck is in Jack. The bad guys are after Jack for the chip on the pod. It's a very tight, well-done 80s script, using the technology that they had at the time. One funny thing about this is that the screenplay was written by 2 guys, Chip Proser, who also came up with the idea for the film, and then Jeffrey Boehm, who was a script doctor in the 80s And I can remember a big article about Jeffrey Boehm in Premiere Magazine. And it's so funny, like in high school, I was so jealous of this guy. Oh man, was I jealous of this guy. Because in a short period, he was the script doctor, which means he polished it, the script, and then got final full credit for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Innerspace, The Lost Boys, Lethal Weapon 2, and then finally Lethal Weapon 3. But he passed away early in 2000. He was only 53. He was quite young. And I just remember reading, every Jeffrey Boehm wrote this, Jeffrey Boehm wrote that. I'm like, that Jeffrey Boehm, man, I'm so jealous. And it's weird to be a teenager. Normally you're jealous of Kirk Cameron. And I'm actually jealous of a screenwriter. But isn't that funny, right? The things you remember. So I remember going to see this movie in the theater in Tennessee. Because we were on vacation, /vacation, /court case, /say goodbye to the father I never knew, all mixed into one. So I remember the first viewing of this, I didn't care for it. Because it's not an in-the-body movie, it's an outside action movie with some in-the-body scenes. As an adult, watching it just over the last couple days, I was mesmerized by how tight and well done the script is. Because once Tuck is put into Jack, he attaches eye electrodes and ear electrodes. Now he can see and hear through Jack, and he directs Jack to his apartment where they have these bonding moments, and Jack realizes that Tuck is a drunk, and that he's only got till 9 a.m. the next day to get him out before Tuck is out of oxygen, and that's just the way it's going to go. So we have our plot, we have our machinations, and we have our time lock on it, where we have only till 9 a.m. the next day, and then he's dead, or we have a resolution. So the chase is on, and this is where the movie takes some really interesting turns. The Meg Ryan character turns out to be a reporter who is on the case of a guy named the Cowboy, who only comes into town in San Francisco to buy technology, illegally obtained technology. He's the guy that brought Velcro to the Middle East, is how they describe him. So when she finally hooks up with Jack through Tuck's interference, their plot is set in motion alongside our main plot, because it's all interconnected now. It's an interesting shortcut to get her involved in the action. I understand screenplay-wise why they do it. It probably was jarring to some audiences to suddenly... We're on the case of this brand new character that shows up like 40 minutes into the film, who is described as like all important. And what's weird is it's played by Robert Picardo. Robert Picardo plays this Middle Eastern man. They've got dark makeup on him. They've got his hair is very curly, and he's playing him like this stereotype. And it's interesting, like it's a layer on layer. He's a Middle Eastern guy, but also a stereotypical cowboy guy. And so Meg Ryan hits on him at this club, and they're going to go back to his place. And the idea is that he's going to make the buy of the chip from the bad guys that the good guys need to re-enlarge Tuck, because you need both chips, right? So when they finally hook up with the cowboy, Tuck gives Jack a rush of adrenaline, and he's able to knock him out. Because Jack's, again, he's this nervous guy. He has nightmares of working his checker job at the grocery store. And Tuck now is fundamentally changing him, giving him the courage to stand up for himself, and that's the storyline. But this was where the movie takes the Joe Dante turn, which I'm a big fan of, and that's Tuck has Jack look at the cowboy, and they map his face digitally. These effects are very rudimentary on a computer, and then he's going to electrically stimulate Jack's face to become the cowboy. So we get this weird puckering scene. It looks like it's done with an air hose out of camera. And then they're swapped out. Robert Picardo has got Martin Short's wig on, his a wig of his hair on, and they're lip syncing Martin Short's voice out of Robert Picardo. So it's a very unsettling. Like you're not sure what you're looking at because it doesn't add up in your brain. And there's a couple of quick shots of the transformation, but they're saving that for the undoing. So they go to lunch, they go to breakfast with the bad guy, played by Kevin McCarthy. He passed away too. Kevin McCarthy was such a great actor. Always played the heavy. What a really all-around great actor, man. He's chewing the scenery in this film. And they get a blowtorch out and threaten Jack, whose adrenaline goes way up and his stress goes way up. And that causes his face to re-engineer itself back to normal. So, if you've ever seen Twilight Zone the movie, you've seen the effects of Rob Bottin, one of the, not an unsung hero, because he did great work. He did Twilight Zone the movie, he did The Thing, he did RoboCop, but he never got a household name the way that, what's his name did for Jurassic Park. Oh my god, I'm having a total brain lock on one of my heroes. Oh, I'm gonna have to cut this out. His name is Stan Winston. He never got to be the household name like Stan Winston did, but Rob Bottin's work was exceptional, and the sort of cartoony kind of thing that they did in Twilight Zone was used in Innerspace for the face transformation, and it's truly unsettling. It's fantastic. I would love to see some stills of how they did this. I'm sure that they were published in Cinefex or Cinefantastique at some point because the sculpting's too good. It's too bizarre. I mean, you're seeing this two faces morphing and melding, but not computer. It's all done practical. It's one of the big showstopper moments of the piece here. But it was probably too weird for audiences back in 1987. Because in Twilight Zone or The Thing, you're expecting that weirdness. This one is like almost Large Marge moment. Like it's totally out of place, but it works in the film. And that's because Dante's just a great director for this kind of material. So there's some chase scenes. Martin Short ends up hanging out the back of a meat truck, and Meg Ryan tries to help, ends up zapping him. There's a lot of ins and outs and twists and turns. It's very well done. It's just such a fun movie. There's a weird moment where you can tell Martin Short is falling for Meg Ryan, even though the guy floating around inside him is in love with her. Like, it's very strange. And so when when Jack Putter tells Tuck to turn off his audio-visual, he then kisses Meg Ryan. And Meg Ryan's only kissing him because she reminds him so much of Tuck, because he's speaking all of Tuck's lines. So this was the one part of the movie that's really unsettling and weird, because Meg Ryan's kissing him because he reminds her of her boyfriend that she just broke up with, that she still has feelings for. And Martin Short's kissing her because he thinks Meg Ryan is hot. So it's a little weird. But during the kiss, the pod with Tuck in it switches into Meg Ryan's body. And he spends the next 20 minutes lost without audio or visual. He doesn't know where he's at. The story then continues with Martin Short is taken to the bad guy's lab, which, in a really cool twist, the good guy's lab is a mess. It's a complete and absolute mess. And nothing looks like it works. People are getting shocked. Paper is everywhere. It's very haphazard. But when they go to the bad guy's lab, it's pristine. It's clean. You get the gist of what they're doing in an instant because everything is very laid out properly. But they miniaturize Vernon Wells and inject him into Martin Short. And his job is to find the pod, get the chip, and then leave, and then be re-enlarged. And at one point, they're just going to leave Tuck Pendleton in the pod to die and let him float around there forever, and then re-enlarge Vernon Wells. And then McCarthy has the idea to, well, we'll just let Vernon Wells re-enlarge while he's inside Martin Short. And the Fiona, the Professor Kanker woman, says, do you know what kind of mess that would make? And we as the audience are like, I hope to God we don't see that. Can you imagine watching a guy, I mean, they've never done that in a movie. A miniaturization gone wrong and it blows up from inside him. I mean, that's the making of a horror movie right there, right? Where they're miniaturizing people in suits, injecting them into people, and then re-enlarging and blowing them up. There's your sequel. Not sequel, but there's your hard reboot in the new millennium, right? So Tuck Pendleton figures out where he's at when he sees, in one of the coolest moments of the movie, he sees that Meg Ryan is pregnant, and he sees the baby that he put there, the fetus. It's really touching. I know it's a puppet, but god darn it, it looks good. It looks beautiful. It's a really well done effect. And when Tuck realizes, well, Jack realizes what happened at that point, because Tuck starts playing their song loud in her ear, and she knows Jack is in her. So Jack realizes we have to kiss again for him to come back to me, and they do that. So it's very cool. But there's a moment, and this is what 80s movies are all about. This is what good solid scripts are about. There's a moment where Meg Ryan is rescuing Jack from the evil lab, and Jack has to fight a guy on the stairs, and he says, Tuck will give me the strength of 10 men, and he beats him. And then he realizes afterwards Tuck was in Meg Ryan, so he did it on his own, even though he thought, I mean, where are you riding a bike with your dad and he lets go and you don't know that he's let go, right? So with Tuck back in Jack, the stage is set for the finale of this film, not before Meg Ryan forces all the bad guys into the miniaturization, and they accidentally shrink them down to half size, which is it's done through the use of giant props, camera angles, and puppets. It's very, very fun. There's a chase scene in the car. They're racing to the lab now. They've got both chips. They're racing to the lab to re-enlarge Tuck. They've got 30 minutes to do it. And at the same time, while they're racing to the lab, the half-size bad guys are molesting them from the back seat and grabbing them and beating them. It's really funny. And inside Jack, there's a fight going on between Vernon Wells and Tuck Pendleton, and Vernon Wells is trying to zap the rest of Tuck's air supply. So it's very well done. It's the ending is completely intense, and all is saved when Vernon Wells is dispatched through, of all things, stomach acid, and he becomes a little tiny skeleton. It's very cute. And then the bad guys are dispatched. The good guys run. Jack sneezes because he's allergic to hairspray, and they re-enlarge Tuck Pendleton, and everything is great. And you'd think the movie would end there. But they actually go a step further and show you the end of the film is actually Tuck and Lydia's wedding. They've got a baby on the way, so they get married. It's very cute. Jack is there as the best man, and as the the happy couple is going off for their honeymoon, the bad guys are in their suitcase because they're only half size, and the limousine is being driven by the cowboy. And so Jack realizes this at the last minute and takes off in pursuit, quitting his job at the grocery store and becoming a new man. Tuck Pendleton has been redeemed because he's now the greatest test pilot ever. He's gone where no man has gone before. Jack Putter is now a confident, vibrant person willing to take on the world and not let people run over him. And everybody wins. And it's a really, like I said, tight, well-done film. It didn't do well at the box office. I think that's because, again, it was mismarketed. It was marketed as a in-the-body adventure movie, and it isn't. It has some of that in it, which is very good. Like I said, the effects are stellar, but that's not what the movie is. The movie is an adventure comedy that happens to have that element to it. There's a lot of character actors in it. You can watch the grocery store scene. You'll see Chuck Jones, who drew Bugs Bunny. Bugs Bunny's very prominent in the film in a couple of scenes. Kevin McCarthy. I looked in the IMDb and it says Jeffrey Boehm is actually in the movie, but I don't remember seeing him. Orson Bean is in it. Henry Gibson from the Blues Brothers. Great cast. Really fun 80s movie. 1987's Innerspace, man. It's on Netflix. You can watch it for free today. Why wouldn't you? And it's a full 2 hours. And you know what, folks? Watch it, because I'm going to tell you right now, within 2 to 3 years, they're going to reboot this movie. No doubt. It'll be a washed up space pilot being injected into a stoner guy who has to run from the bad guys while being stoned. That will be my gritty new reboot of this film. So you tell me, huh? You tell me if that's what it's going to be. And this movie stars the amazing Martin Short and Dennis Quaid, who I've really grown to just idolize over the years. He played Jerry Lee Lewis, Enemy Mine, The Right Stuff, Undercover Blues, Frequency. I mean, Quaid has done some fantastic movies, and this is one of them. So it's weird to think some of these. I mean, Martin Short doesn't really work anymore. He does cameos here and there. I don't remember the last thing I saw Quaid in. I know he was in a TV show, because he was in that weird fake viral video where he was yelling and screaming, but I don't think that was real. But I've not met anybody. I've never met Joe Dante, Dennis Quaid, Martin Short, or Meg Ryan. And boy, poor Meg Ryan, she's vanished, right? Who knows where she went? What a great body of work she has. Some of the greatest comedies of all time. She should still be working. It's okay to get old. It's okay to age gracefully. So we wish Meg Ryan would come back. In fact, bring them all back and do a sequel. Innerspace 2. This time it's really Innerspacey, personal error, whatever. So hey, that's Innerspace, folks. More movie reviews are on the way. I promised Michael Bondi I would do Romancing the Stone, which is a treat and not a chore in any way. So that's coming. Thanking everybody who supports the show on Patreon. We couldn't do it without you. Check out my new book on Amazon.com called Your Friend in Time, How Back to the Future Changed My Life. You can also get the 6th Key series. There are 4 of them. And the 5th is I'm working on right now. They are the 6th Key, the Lost Station, the Infinite Backward, and the Ice Temple. And coming next year, the Tomorrow Machine, the 5th and final book in the 6th Key series. And yes, I know the 6th Key series only has 5 books. That's supposed to make it mysterious, not weird. Hey, I'm Jeff Tucker. Thanks for listening to this I Am Tired, Scary Farm-fueled episode of 91 Reasons.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?